All right, so for this project, I chose to focus on A Tale with a Riddle, which was actually shown at the local University of Kentucky Fine Arts Museum this week. It was a feature, and here we go. Here is the work on the right. It's called A Tale with a Riddle. It's by a young artist named Natalie Frank, which was kind of what intrigued me about it, was that she um, isn't that much older than I am, maybe 10 to 15 years. So it was cool to just see a younger influence on her work. This piece was done in 2011, and it's a 22 inch by 30 inch to give you an idea of the size. She currently lives in New York City, New York, where she is known primarily as a painter. But this work is actually with chalk pastel. And I know we're supposed to do a painting, but I was so intrigued by this work that I just decided to bend the rules a little bit because I had a lot to say for it. So artist background, like I said, her name's Natalie Frank. She was born in Austin, Texas in 1980, and she's mainly been known for her paintings up until the Brothers Grimm series, which this work is actually a feature out of. A lot of her main themes deal with power, sexuality, gender, feminism, and identity construction. I really like talking about those just because I'm a sociology major at Furman, so it's something that I deal with a lot with my classes and my research. So it was cool to see an artist that passionate about things like that too. So this work in particular, like I said, is an illustration pulled out from her Brothers Grimm series. She had started to read the novels a few years back and became really intrigued by them. And when she realized that there hadn't been any modern illustrations, she kind of started dabbling and creating these chalk drawings on the side. Um, and she never really thought anything would come of it. It was kind of her summer thing. It was something she did for enjoyment. It wasn't something she was aiming for an exhibition for. But later and on throughout the projects, she talked to an exhibitor and they really thought that they could make something out of these works. So she started to focus on it in the later years. And between 2001 and 2014, she created 75 drawings based on the original Brothers Grimm stories. And originally, she wanted to tackle all the Brother Grimm stories, but there are so many that she joked in one of the videos I was researching with that it would be like 3,000 pages, which is probably true. Um, so, oh, and then a lot of these pieces, they focus on color and texture to kind of distort the images. So you can kind of see it pulled out with like the green and the bright orange in this particular piece, but a lot of the other ones are just as vivid, and the proportions are also off with how she expresses the human body, which is really intriguing. So some Brothers Grimm background. These are fairy tale books by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm from the 1800s. They take fairy tales and put a different spin on them. It's very eerie. It's very mature. They're known as warning stories for children if they're meant for children at all. So a prime example of this is that they take the Snow White story, and instead of it being the evil stepmother who summons Snow White to be captive, it's actually her biological mother. And just more intense things like that, certain spins that are a little more gruesome. So my analysis of this work, it obviously, like I had mentioned before, has very vivid colors. You can see the green and the orange along the walls, the striped carpet, the blues in the background. That's a very like special blue that also comes out in the forefront, which I think is cool. It draws your eye back and forth. The crazy colors on the man's shirt and the flowers and just a lot of detail that's kind of weird. The texture changes you can see on the ceiling. There's an eerie shadow. The curtains to the flowers to the lady's hair. Just everything's kind of heightened. Also, the human figures, how much larger the male figure is, was something that really caught my eye. And the woman, her stance is kind of over the shoulder and more passive, whereas the guy is forefront and confrontational and much more like a watching Big Brother effect. Something that I like to note and, well, basically to not overlook is the indoor versus outdoors with like classic gender role and identities, or outside is the man's work and inside the household is the woman's. So I thought that was interesting. It's very modern, so even though these fairy tales were set in the 1800s, she has a modern sofa, and the artwork here on the wall seems like a mirror image or something that my mom would put in her office now. the lamps and just very cool things. And also the woman who's crying, which is watering the flowers, which I think is kind of another symbol for kind of gender roles and identity construction. So thanks for watching. That's my thoughts on the picture.